Hello and welcome to the Starting Sisters series, the series where we go from your first purchase to your first 2,000 point army list and everything in between within the 9th edition codex for the Sisters of Battle, also known as the Adepta Sororitas. In this video, like all first videos within a faction series, we'll begin by looking at what you should consider for your first purchases within your army and how to best optimize your value when starting out an army, as well as what to avoid when you're purchasing things early on so you don't buy things that you find that you have little use for in the near future, especially when you're first getting your army off of the ground. With that being said, the first thing I would like to address is that the Sisters of Battle unfortunately do not have a combat patrol option available to them, and normally the combat patrol box or a start collecting box is one of the best values. There was an old school introductory kit available for the Sisters. Unfortunately, that is very hard to find, and it wasn't a particularly optimal option. In addition to that, it came with the old 8th edition codex, and as such, if or when the combat patrol is announced for the Sisters of Battle, I'll cover it at that time and take a look at what the value is of that combat patrol box, as I have done with all other factions. However, at this time, we'll have to work with other options that are available to us when starting a Sisters army. So with that being said, what is the first thing that you should buy until the combat patrol box becomes available, if it does? The first thing you should purchase is a box of basic Sisters of Battle, and this kit is one of the best first purchases you can have within any army. And the reason this kit is so good is because of how versatile it is in terms of what it can build into. To begin with, a lot of kits can build into several different options, and this kit is no exception. The basic Sisters of Battle kit can build into your basic Sisters of Battle, which are your only troop choice, so you'll always have use for them in that regard at the very least. Though they can also build into elite choice known as the Celestians, which aren't bad in their own right, as well as a fast attack choice known as the Dominions, who are already decent enough, but have seen a rather reasonable power boost going into the 9th edition codex. So already you have 3 rather good options, including one that is baseline for every army pretty much. Now that's not all this kit can build into, as you can build into a few other options by making a few minor conversions. The first of these options that you can convert into is you can take one of your basic Sisters and convert it into a Canonist or Palatine HQ choice. And this is actually a rather good way to save a lot of money, considering that a Canonist or Palatine can cost $30 alone and does not look substantially different from one of the Sisters you can build from the basic Sisters box. And considering you get 10 Sisters of Battle within that box, it's a rather amazing value, considering that you all of a sudden saved up to $60 by converting that Canonist and Palatine out of your basic Sisters. In fact, with some work you can convert them into other characters, though in most cases the Canonist and the Palatine are the easiest ones to convert. And as you can see on screen, I've put up a comparison between the Canonist model and some basic Sisters built out of the basic Sister box. As you can clearly see, there is very little difference between the two. However, if you happen to enjoy the Canonist and you want to pick one up, feel free to do so. It just costs a little bit of extra money and it's a little less budget friendly. Though that being said, it is a decent enough model and isn't the worst thing in the world, though I do think it's a little bit more expensive than it should be. Following the ability to build a Canonist or a Palatine, you can also build some Retributors out of your basic Sisters box. The Retributors are a heavy support choice and normally come with quite a few special weapons. However, one issue with the Retributors is that the box of Retributors comes with 2 of each special weapon and 5 Sisters models total, when in reality you'll usually want something like 4 multi-meltas on your Retributor squad. This means you'll be 2 multi-meltas short when you purchase your box of Retributors. However, one thing you can do is you can take your basic Sisters Heavy Flamer, cut the barrels off of the Heavy Flamer, and then cut the barrels off of the regular melta gun and attach them to the Heavy Flamer. By doing this, you create a Sister Battle with a multi-melta that can also be used as a Retributor and can save you quite a bit of money. Or you can also go on eBay and buy some Sisters multi-melta parts and attach them to your basic Sisters in order to make a squad of Retributors, which would normally cost you way more to buy. In either case, it's up to you how you do it, though I will say you'll generally find use for your multi-meltas within the Sisters army, as even something like the Celestians or the basic Sisters can easily be equipped with them to great effect, but they're actually rather high in demand because they don't come in the basic Sisters box, so the only real way to acquire them is by buying Retributors. And when you purchase those Retributors, you only get 2 within the box, and considering you want 4 in your Retributor squad, it becomes rather burdensome to find all of the multi-meltas you'll want in your army as a whole. As such, I would highly recommend converting at least a couple out of the basic Sisters boxes, once again showing the versatility that you can have with the Sisters army. In all reality, you can buy 1 or 2 boxes of basic Sisters pretty early on, as you'll always have some use for them considering how many roles they can fill, and even though the combat patrol will probably contain more basic Sisters, if it does come out, you'll probably have use for them as well, considering they make up your basic troop choice and are rather good as Dominions, Retributors, or Celestians. However, if you're worried about the Combat Patrol box coming out and you wanting to buy multiple boxes of the Combat Patrol, you can begin by picking up 1 unit of basic Sisters and converting that Canonist out of them, as well as a Palatine, and slowly painting those up while you wait for the Combat Patrol box to come out, and in the meantime you can also convert that multi-melta. Now, what other models can you buy early on that will serve you rather well as you build out your army? Well, one other kit that I think has a rather good value is the Mortifier kit. They saw a bit of a change in the 9th edition codex that could be considered a bit of a nerf, but they're still rather good considering how few points they cost. More so, you get 2 Mortifiers per box for $60, which is actually somewhat surprising as usually models like this are more expensive and not bundled in such a convenient way. And the nicest thing about the Mortifiers is that they're incredibly versatile, as they can function as both a ranged threat as well as a melee threat, while also being rather durable and resilient, making them a decent annoyance for your opponent to take down. As such, they're rather easy units to include in most armies, and they do look rather cool, while also being a rather good deal for their dollar cost. If you like how the Mortifiers look, I would definitely consider buying them early on, considering they're rather inexpensive, and you can put quite a few of them in a list and feel perfectly fine. And not only that, but the Mortifiers also build into the Penitent engines, and while I'm not the biggest fan of the Penitent engine, you can always include a mix of both in your army and have fun with them in that way. In fact, back in 8th edition, there were lists that went very heavy on Mortifiers and Penitent engines, even though the Penitent engine was worse in the 8th edition codex, and those armies performed rather well considering how powerful those units could be and how durable they are. One other model I'd like to mention is the new model known as the Dogmata, and the Dogmata is a rather powerful unit that brings quite a lot to the table with all of her special abilities. That being said, the model is pretty goofy looking, so maybe consider converting her out of a basic sister and some bits if you don't like how the model looks. If you do like how the model looks, despite it having a bit of a static pose and a slightly goofy face, then don't let me dissuade you from purchasing it. Though once again, if you do convert her out of a basic sister and some bits you end up having left over from either one of your other armies or from the basic sisters box or Mortifier box, then you can definitely save yourself some more money, considering that she's about the same size as the normal sister anyway, and is easy enough to convert if you take a little bit of time and effort, considering all you really need to do is give her a big old mace as a bonking stick. Now that we've looked at a few units that you'll probably include in most of your list going forward, as well as ones that are very versatile in their application or have a rather reasonably high power level in terms of what they can provide to your army, let's look at some units that you should avoid when you're first starting out. One thing I want to say before we begin looking at this list is don't assume that simply because I mentioned something in this section of the video that it means the unit or model is bad, but rather I'll say why the unit should be avoided early on, and in many cases won't because the model is unplayable, but rather some other aspect that makes it less optimal of a purchase early on. That being said, the first thing you should obviously avoid are obviously things like the Canis and Palatine, which you can convert out of basic sisters. Once again, all of those models are perfectly fine, and the Canis is actually a rather strong choice. However, considering that each of them costs $30 to $35, it doesn't really make sense to buy them early on, especially if you're on a bit of a tight budget, considering you can convert them out of basic sisters with a lot of ease. So as such, when buying a character, consider what you can do with your basic sisters first, because Sisters of Battle is already a rather expensive army, with no combat patrol being available currently to help reduce some of that cost. The second set of units you should avoid when first purchasing your army is any of the larger characters if you're just trying to build up a 500-point army list. And once again, the reason for this isn't the power level of these characters, as they're rather strong, but a lot of the characters are rather points heavy, making them eat up quite a massive part of your army at 500 points. That being said, something like Celestine, which is an army of 1, is much easier to include within a 500-point list than something like the Triumph of St. Catherine, who is a force multiplier, meaning that the less force you have to multiply, the weaker the Triumph is within a game. And considering that the Triumph of St. Catherine will eat up almost 50% of your army within a 500-point game, it doesn't really make sense to include such an expensive model just to buff your other units who you have limited rather heavily by including that model. That being said, once you reach 1000 points or more, it's much easier to include these different characters, so if you're jumping right into that scale of game, then definitely consider them, considering something like the Triumph of St. Catherine can be incredibly powerful within a 2000-point list, as in a 2000-point army, the Triumph can buff quite a lot of your forces and make them rather powerful. Though even with that in mind, the one character I would still avoid even at larger point games is something like Astrid Thurga and Agatha Dolan, which are the flag bearer models, simply because they're a little bit on the weak side. Outside of that, I'd say Celestine, Triumph, and all of the other characters are rather powerful, and should definitely be considered for inclusion within larger armies. One last subset of units that I would suggest avoiding when you're first purchasing your army, especially in a 500-point game, is the following batch of units, being the Death Cult Assassin, Immolators, Crusaders, and Archoflagellants. The reason for this being is that they're not unplayable, but rather the majority of them fill a rather niche role, and as such, you should wait till you establish the core of your army and then decide which ones you want in order to fill specific functions within that army, as opposed to buying them early on and trying to force them within an army. Though in some cases like the Immolator, if you see the Piety and Pain box for a reasonable price, it does make sense to buy it because you'd be getting the Immolator at such a low price that even though it might sit on the shelf for a little bit, it's still not the worst option to have available to you if you do end up wanting to play it. And considering the Piety and Pain box is a bit of a rarity, it's not something you want to let slip by when you have the ability to purchase it, as it's a rather limited product that is rather well priced and incredibly rare to find in most cases. Now that we've looked at a bit of a mix of things you should buy early on and things you should avoid early on when you're first laying the groundwork for your Sisters of Battle army, I will mention this, everything I didn't mention here is a decent enough pickup. Any of those other units are perfectly fine and you can fit them into your army list. They just depend more on what you want and they're not as evergreen as something like your basic Sisters box or Mortifiers. Though as a whole, at the end of the day, if you like a model, don't be afraid to give it a try, because even though it might not be an optimal choice when starting out, you can still easily have fun with it and make it work most likely, because Warhammer is an incredibly complex game and there's no limit to the amount of surprises people will bring out within tournament play and even casual play, so never be discouraged from trying something different and trying something out that other people might not consider as being the optimal choice. With that, we conclude the first video in the Sister series, so join me in the next installment of the series when we take a look at the different special rules that make the Sisters of Battle such a unique army and so interesting to play. They have quite a lot of different special abilities and special rules that make them a very complicated and interesting army, so definitely don't miss out, because while the purchasing video might be a little boring, considering that most of Sisters of Battle units are viable, but within their own specific niche, the special rules and unit videos are going to be significantly more exciting considering how deep and complex the Sisters of Battle can be. And as always, if you've enjoyed the content, like and subscribe, as it really does help the channel out, and if you get the opportunity, please do share the channel, as that not only massively helps the channel, but also helps the people who may discover it and benefit from the content. I would also like to give a quick shout out to my patrons. You guys are awesome people. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, and regardless if you're a patron or not, thank you for watching, and have a great day. See you next time. Bye.